what makes things better? Is it just making buildings bigger? Is it just making new buildings, or what all does that mean?
Well, the statutes and ordinances that are focused on preservation of historical buildings and sites have a lot of language that militate in favor of preserving what's there instead of replacing it.
Right.
Okay. So when you say, okay, we can increase our tax base, I mean, why don't we make it 10 stories high? I mean, the more square footage, the more, that's true.
Which is the incentive of the governing body to bring in more tax base.
Right. But more is not necessarily better. So we brought all this stuff in. Now we got floods. Now we got congested roads. Now we got schools because we outstripped that are overcrowded because we outstripped our infrastructure. So let's start with more is not always better. But more to the point, the statutes put in place policies, requirements of preserving what's there when possible. So like this Hotel Aiken here, you can say, well, we're just going to demolish it and replace it and get something modern. But when you really get down to the ordinances and the written requirements, they're supposed to preserve it if possible. And they say, well, it's not feasible, or it's not a good idea. Well, how do you know it's not? Did you have some expert look at it? Oh, you're expert, or the person you chose. Okay, well, what about this other expert that says, here's how you can preserve it? So what it comes down to is the governing body, if they're acting in good faith, will open-mindedly get expert input about whether the law, what the facts are, to make a decision based on the criteria set forth in the law. So if the criteria is you're supposed to preserve it if possible, now we got to determine whether it's possible. And how are we going to do that? Well, we on town council don't know whether it's possible. So are we going to? We're going to investigate, and we're going to do what the law requires, not what we personally would prefer.
Well, and if I can interject, I mean, this is what I dealt with being the preservationist when I go in front of these town councils and planning commissions. There is unfortunately an inherent bias against folks talking preservation because people really don't understand the issues behind these old buildings. And we live in a throwaway culture where most folks think if it's dilapidated, well, with laissez-faire capitalism, it's dilapidated for a reason. It's not worth keeping. If it was worth keeping, it'd be alive. It'd be being used. If it's been empty 5 years, they just want to throw it away. And the thing that's most astonishing about that argument is how many times I see that as a planned obsolescence.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's called demolition by neglect.
Yes.
And that is prohibited by law. So that's an example. Okay, let's just let it sit there. Let's let the weeds grow up. And it'll look so bad, we'll take pictures of it, and then we'll declare it's blighted. Okay? So, and therefore we got to tear it down. We got to demolish it, and we got to replace it. Well, this sometimes is orchestrated.
Yeah.
So it's in bad faith. And actually there's an obligation of the owner not to let it be demolished by neglect. So why isn't the town enforcing that requirement?
Well,
like getting a court order to fix up the property, or like in Somerville, the town actually bought the property and it was the town that let it be demolished by neglect.
Well, in regards to the Aiken Hotel, that's all I was hearing when I first came down. When some of the citizens, when I was still with Preservation South Carolina, that's all they were dealing with. The town saying it's too far gone. It's too far gone. We've had engineers say that it's too far gone. Well, first of all, for every 10 engineers that have been trained in modern engineering, there's probably maybe one that understands the structure of historic buildings and how they work.